How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Silas. Today I'm going to be not reacting to anything. This video is going to be a little different. So it's going to be two parts to this video. Sorry, excuse me. The first part is my review of the new Devil Wears Prada album, Flowers. Reason it's not a reaction is because I already heard half the album through singles. And so when it released, I didn't think it would be worth it to do a full album reaction because it's kind of, I've heard half the album already. And so from now on, if there is an album I'm interested in hearing, I will limit the amount of singles I listen to because I don't like when bands release all like 6 singles. Like if you want to release 3, I think that should be kind of the limit before you release a full album. That's my personal opinion. Some people enjoy album release cycles differently. I personally like less singles. That way almost all the whole album is new. That being said, I still want to give my review on the album Flowers because for a lot of people it was split because it's a lot different than what they've done in the past. I will say one thing I do appreciate about this band is every single album / EP has been kind of them trying something different style-wise. And I'll go more into that in my album ranking. Now, that's the second part of the video. I want to do an album ranking because this band is one of my favorite bands of all time, and I want to show you guys my thoughts on their different albums and EPs because, everybody enjoys music differently, and I'll give you my reasons for liking some of their music over some other parts of their music, I guess. But anyway, and it'll show you where this album ranks for me. But anyway, we'll start with Flowers, and I'll kind of go a little bit down song by song, give not too many thoughts on each song because I don't want this video to be forever. But just give you kind of my surface thoughts on every song because it's been a couple weeks now since this album released, so I've had some time to listen to it quite a few times. And I will say it's not my favorite Prada album. I don't think it even, it's not close to my favorite Prada album. But I will explain why. So, starting with the first 2 songs, because I think the intro goes pretty well into the second song. That Same Place and then Where the Flowers Never Grow. I think it is a very solid start to an album. I think the intro is... As an intro, it is very good. I love an album that starts with a good intro and that leads directly into the next song, and I think they do that very well. I love the string synth that they're using, if that is what that is. I think that's a keyboard part in that song. I think it has a very, very solid chorus, really memorable breakdown. Even though I don't feel like breakdown is necessarily fitting, I do enjoy it because it gives Mike more of a chance to shine, which I will admit is one of my cons of this album, and I will restate this later, is that Mike does not appear as a lead enough, in my opinion. So hearing him a little bit more in this song, in that breakdown and the second verse and stuff, is nice. So yeah, I do enjoy this song a lot. I love the ending breakdowns, very nice, very chunky. So yeah, it's a solid song. I think it would, place somewhere in the middle of like my favorites from them on this album. The next song, Everybody Knows. I think this song is also... I don't think there's necessarily a bad song in this album. Let me phrase that first. But I do think this song is a little bit more forgettable than some of the other ones. It's just... It feels like... And I know they had help with other writers on this album. It wasn't just the band writing this album, and sometimes it shows. This feels almost like it was made to be commercial, and I kind of don't like that. It just feels a little bit too like, hey, we need to make this a hit on the radio, and a lot of the songs on this album unfortunately have that effect, I think. So yeah, this song is just not as memorable. I don't think the chorus is as good. The verses, it barely features Mike, in my opinion. So yeah, and that's one thing I want to touch on is, so songs like this where you put kind of Mike in the background, and yeah, maybe to give him something to do in live performances, I don't know, or in the music videos, he's playing a guitar, which he does in some songs. That's fine, but with this album, a third guitar really isn't necessary, because it's not like they're doing crazy riffs. There's not a lot of like memorable riffs on this album, in my opinion. And so a third guitar is completely unnecessary, and I think it's just kind of them being like, oh, well, he's not doing a lot of vocals on this, let's give him a guitar. That's what it looks like. I'm sure they have their own reasons for everything. But, so yeah, kind of forgettable in my opinion. Solo, this is probably my like fifth or sixth favorite song on the album. I really enjoy this one. I think as the lyrics for the chorus may be a little cheesy, but I do appreciate the melody of it, and like it's a very memorable chorus. I love how the first chorus kind of dialed back, while the second one is a big huge feel to it. Again, I love Mike's second verse, and the breakdown in this just feels very old. So yeah, really solid song in my opinion. For You, that's got to be top 4 for me. And I heard this ages ago. It was the second single released, and so it was still fresh, and maybe that's why I'm drawn to it more. I think a lot of the problems with some of these songs is if it was just that song that sounded like that, it would be a lot more refreshing. Like Everybody Knows would probably be a lot more refreshing if it was the only song on the album that had this sort of arena octane sound, I guess. But since it's like most of the album, I don't think those songs stick out as much. But For You does for me. I don't know what it is, if it's the chorus, the breakdown, there's something about that song that just kind of sticks with me, and I'm singing it all the time. All Out. I think All Out is the best song in the album. And I don't want to be one of those guys who's like, oh, it's the heaviest song, so it's the best song. Because that's not usually my thought on some albums. The last album, I think Hallucinate was the heaviest song on it, Color Decay. And, I still didn't think that was the best song necessarily. But this album, I think it is the case for many reasons. Reason one, I think All Out is the best song on the album because it is a Mike-heavy song. I listened to Devil Wears Prada. I love Jeremy's vocals, don't get me wrong. And I think he's matured really well throughout the years. But I listened to Devil Wears Prada for Mike's vocals more because he was the lead vocalist. It doesn't seem like that much in this album, but in all the previous albums, Color Decay kind of split them, which I was fine with because you still got plenty of Mike-heavy songs. This is the only song that is completely like, this is Mike's song. Yeah, Jeremy had the chorus, but I think that's how a lot of old Prada used to be. It was Jeremy just had the chorus or had a singing part, and then it was Mike the rest of the song. The other reason was the riffs. This had chunky breakdowns. This had an awesome killer intro riff and intro/verse riff. And honestly, because of that riff and just the chunkiness of this, it really brought me back to 818. This felt like a song that could be part of that era, which was really interesting because I don't even think Color Decay had any songs that I thought was like an 818 kind of song. So that's really what drew me to this, because I really do love Color Decay, and I really do love 818, and just hearing stuff from like a heavier era, it draws it. I don't know. I really enjoyed All Out, and I will constantly go back to that. I think it's the best song. Ritual. I think Ritual is a very solid song. I think that might be my third favorite song. And again, it has more mic parts, which I really do enjoy. I love the synth. The synth is just very, very catchy and memorable. Like the one that is played the most in the song. Really, really enjoy that. And the chorus. What a banger chorus. I think Ritual has one of the best choruses on this album. If I had to say what the best chorus on this album is, it's either Ritual or When You're Gone. But yeah, and solid breakdown. It wasn't like the most memorable breakdown they had. I think All Outs and Solo had better breakdowns, but I enjoyed Ritual a lot. When You're Gone, I think this is the second best song. Reason being, this was the most unique in my opinion, because it had, first of all, the just dramatic slow riff. And I say slow because it was like a halftime feel on the drums. It wasn't like super high pace, high energy, like all out. It's just something about that riff. Again, like the only other riff on the album is is this song. So I'm like, that's an exaggeration, of course, but like it seemed like there wasn't a lot of guitar riffs going throughout the album. Yeah, When You're Gone, really memorable riff. And yeah, it drops out, lets Jeremy sing the verses, and then that chorus, killer chorus. Huge chorus. And I like how they did like a first verse and then dropped into that riff, which wasn't necessarily the chorus, and then did a second verse and then hit the chorus. So that was kind of unique song structure, and I wish they did more of that. And then the breakdown or riff down, whatever you want to call it, it was like a riff down and then a breakdown, I guess. Really memorable. The way they did that, I will admit the lyrics are a little bit cheesy or kind of like iffy when it comes to the breakdown call out, but I still enjoy Mike's vocals a lot. So really nice hearing him in that part. And then just a killer, it had a similar effect in the Noise, Alpha Color Decay, with the build up to the heavy part in that song too. It was kind of the same effect, and I really enjoyed that part in Noise, and I really enjoy it here. And it just had this interesting rhythm, and yeah, and I just love how the chorus kind of brought that riff. It made the intro riff different, kind of, but still included it. And then there was that heavy bass line in the chorus. So yeah, sorry, I'm rambling, but this is one of the best songs on the album, in my opinion. The Sky Behind the Rain, that is an interlude. So I'm never going to say. I don't really rate interludes because, most of the time they're very short. There's not a lot to them, or they're just leading into the next song. So, yeah, I think interludes are cool. I enjoy a good interlude here and there. I think they're good pieces to tie songs together. So, yeah, interlude, I don't really have much to say about it. The Silence, this one grew on me. This is very much a Jeremy song, but I think it's necessary. Because it's not just a Jeremy song like everybody knows, but it has something different. It's going in the more like pop, electronic direction than rock. So it's cool, even though it was very much a Jeremy, like, this sounds kind of like it would be on the radio. It's very much unique in its own way because of the instrumental. I think it's a lot different than some of the other Jeremy, quote, Jeremy songs on this album. So I really enjoy The Silence for that reason. Eyes has got to be one of the best songs on the album for me also, because I think I love Mike's parts on this, even though they weren't like, it wasn't a Mike heavy song, like none of the songs are except All Out really, but and half of When You're Gone. Really enjoyed it though. I love the uniqueness of right before the pre-chorus. The pre-chorus is really unique because it's just something that you don't expect to come from Prada. It's not the classic Prada sound, and a lot of people love the classic Prada sound, but it's also not something that's felt throughout this album. It's something different. So I appreciate them doing that with that pre-chorus. And then chorus is really good, and I love when they bring the chorus back, that synth, and the final chorus is just super dramatic and heavy hitting, and the synth is just there, heavy in your face. Love the synth on this song, especially near the end. That's really what drew me to it. Cure Me. Cure Me is probably my least favorite song on this album. Reason being, I think it's the most forgettable. I think it sounds very much, I don't know, there's just nothing that really grabs me about Cure Me. That's all I can really say about it. It just doesn't grab me. It's kind of boring in my opinion, Another Jeremy song that just doesn't have the most memorable chorus, because like sometimes a song could be like that, but it has a killer chorus, and so I'm immediately drawn to it. Not this song. This song, I don't think it's a bad song by any means, because I don't really think Devil Wears Prada has released a bad song, but it's just kind of boring in my opinion. Not really for me. I think it's a song, if I listen to this album, or if I listen to Devil Wears Prada on shuffle, I might skip that song, Wave. Now, Wave is, I'm conflicted about Wave. Wave is one of those songs where the more and more I listen to it, the more it grows on me. I still think it's like the slowest song on the album, which I think, every metalcore album kind of needs one of those slow songs for the contrast. The problem with Wave is I think it would be a lot more impactful if this album was heavier, Not saying every Prada album should be super heavy. I'm just saying it doesn't feel like the slow song anymore because of songs like Everybody Knows and Cure Me and For You. Like, even though I love For You, it's just like Wave doesn't seem like it stands out as much because it is now just kind of part of that mix. It does feel a little slower because it's not as drum heavy or, fast paced, but it's just like, I feel like it could have been more impactful, say, if Wave was on it. Say, give songs like Fire. Is it Fire? Hold on, sorry. I'm not gonna butcher this. Yeah, Fire. It is Fire. Fire and 25 on Color Decay, I think, were very impactful because they were what I considered the slower songs on that album, especially Fire. And it was more impactful because the rest of the album was a little bit more high energy, fast paced, heavier, and so I think Wave kind of loses its impact because of that. And then My Paradise, I don't know how to feel about this one. Again, it's not as memorable. And for an album closer, I think, I think Cancer was a much better album closer, in my opinion. Cancer is not my favorite Prada song, definitely not my favorite song off of Color Decay, but it's still a good album closer, I think, and they did it correctly. My Paradise, again, falls under the category of this could have been more memorable. Maybe if they went a little bit more dramatic with the ending of the song to wrap up the album instead of going back to the chorus, I think that would have been better. So, yeah. So, overall, it is not my favorite Prada album. Now I kind of give you my thoughts song by song. I'll give you my overall thoughts of the album through like a pros and cons. This, and I don't usually do a full album review like this. I usually give my reaction and kind of give my thoughts throughout the reaction. But since I didn't do reaction, I still wanted to do a review. But pros of this album, I think, are production. Amazing. It sounds really nice. I really enjoy what they did with the production. Love the synths. When there was heavy parts, they were really beefy sounding guitars. Really love the breakdowns. And the vocals sounded really good in the mix. So honestly, awesome production. That part sounded really nice. Another part I want to say was very solid was I do see where they were going with this album. So I will say, if I'd never heard The Devil Wears Prada before, maybe I would like this album more, and I think it is a solid album, and if I was maybe to try to get somebody into heavier music, I might use this as a gateway album, because it's, probably their softest album, but has heavy moments, so it's like, all right, let me ease you into this. So I think it is a solid album, especially when you rank it towards other... if we're talking octane core or arena rock, you compare Flowers to maybe Memphis Mayfire's newer stuff or Architects, For Those That Wish to Exist. Well, I can't use that album because that's one of my favorite albums of all time. But like it's solid. It stands up there with those as good, solid octane core or solid arena rock. Really solid in that place. So I think that's good. And their vocals still sound phenomenal on this album. And overall, it's a Prada album. I still think it's solid. Cons wise, I think my biggest con is I wish Mike had a stronger presence in this album. Because overall, instrumentally, it wasn't like terrible. Color Decay had songs like 25, which was very slow or not very, riff heavy. But it was Mike heavy, and it was a Mike song, and I enjoy his vocals, and the act was the same way. A lot of songs on the act were very either slow or just not super instrumentally intricate with riffs and stuff, but they still featured... It had Mike's kind of spoken word into screams, kind of poetic feeling, and I really enjoyed that. And there's another con, this album did not feel as poetic as previous albums like Color Decay and The Act. It just felt like it was formulaic, and a lot of that might have to do with pulling different writers from different projects to help with this. It felt like they were like, all right, what can we do to make this a radio song? And I don't like that. I really wish they would just stick to, all right, let's write through emotion and how we're feeling. And, yeah, these songs had meaning and emotion and how we're feeling, but it also felt like very formulaic of, all right, what's a clever line for the chorus that will, be very easy to sing? I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about it. I know I've rambled on about this album because I want to get to my album ranking too. Yeah, it's solid album. And you're about to see where I rank it, and you're about to get mad. So yeah, that is kind of my feelings on Flowers. I still liked it. It's just, it's growing on me the more I listen to it, I will say. All right. If you just wanted to see my thoughts on Flowers, then yeah, you can end the video here, whatever you want to do. If you want to see and possibly get mad at where I rank Devil Wears Prada albums, stick around because I'm about to go into it. Now, they have 9 studio albums. I'm putting 12 spots on here, and that is because I'm choosing to include their EPs. There's a very good reason for that, and you'll see my main reason for including the EPs by the end. So, give me a second. I have to set up something real quick. My computer is dumb. Okay. All right. I hope my mic doesn't pick that up too much. Okay, so I will give you guys my thoughts on where I rank all their music. And this is one thing I will say for certain, or I guess a precursor to this is my own personal opinion. This is how I experienced Devil Wears Prada. So it's going to differ from a lot of people's lists. It's going to differ from yours. I know it is, because everybody experiences music differently. Whether it's, oh, this is the first album I heard, so it has more meaning to me, or I don't listen to this album that much, or I just got into it recently, so it's not as high on the list. So there's going to be reasons like that. So you might get mad and be like, what? That's their best album. What are you talking about? This is going to upset some people. I'm just saying. So be prepared to not agree with this list. But this is my own personal thoughts on the Devil Wears Prada catalog, because they are probably in my top 5 favorite bands of all time. So I'm going to rank these. Hold on a second. Okay. I'm going to rank these how I feel about them. So coming in at number 12, and this is where people might get mad, is their first album. Give me a second, because I'm so unfamiliar with this album that I don't even really know its full name. I know it's Dear Love, but there's another part of that. Sorry, Dear Love, A Beautiful Discord. The reason this is at the bottom of the list, there's a couple reasons. Reason number one is I only recently heard this album this year. So it is lower on the list because I just haven't had as much time to get into it. The first album I heard from them was Roots, so I never delved behind that album until this year. So the reason that is why this album, and their second album is probably not as high as you want it either. There's one reason that album is this low. The other reason, and this is me just being picky, is I don't think this is their first album, debut album. It's a good start. I think it's solid, has cool riffs. It's just unpolished, and that's why it's lower, because I think since this album they've evolved and improved their craft and really solidified their sound. So I think this is, even though this is a good start, it's at the bottom of the list because I just think it could have been, it's their first album. It's not going to be as polished. Jeremy's vocals are a little rough here. He's gotten way better and more mature at singing. And honestly, I think Jeremy sounds the best since the Space EP on. I think he's really matured since the first few albums, and so that is why I've ranked this so low. And, you know, production, again, not the best. So I think they've really... And for some, this is also a very picky part for me for this album. I don't like, even though it has some cool synth parts, I don't really like the synth in their first 2 albums as much as later on. And I know they've had a lot of lineup changes. You know, they don't have the same keyboardist that they did before 818. Or, yeah, I think Transit Blues is the new keyboardist. So yeah, that's my thoughts, why that's rated number 12. Number 11 on the list is Flowers. And again, I should preface this. Even though I ranked Dear Love number 12, it's still a good album. They're one of my favorite bands for a reason. I don't think any of their works have been bad at all. So just because it's low on the list does not mean it's a bad album in my eyes. I still enjoy it. I just enjoy the others a little bit more. Flowers is number 11. I've stated a lot of reasons of why that would be in my album review, but again, to reiterate, I wish it was more mic heavy. It's felt a little formulaic, so it's a little lower on the list. Really enjoy a lot of what I've heard of it. It's just, you know, it's not as memorable as their last album, and I really would have enjoyed it more if it was just less, if Mike took the lead on it like he usually does. You know, I don't have much else to say about it because I gave most of my thoughts earlier. So yeah, that's number 11. Number 10, and you're gonna get mad again, but again, I will reiterate the same points I did for Dear Love. Plagues for me is number 10. Main reason is I did not get into that album until this year. I had never heard it before this year, and again, I think they're starting to evolve more in this, but they've matured more, and I like their matured sound a little bit more. Now, the reason why it's above the Flowers and Dear Love is because I think it is really it has a lot more solid points in those 2 albums. A lot more better riffs in this album. Really enjoy Mike's vocals a lot more in this album. I think Dear Love, his vocals were a little rough, and Jeremy's vocals are still rough in Plagues, in my opinion. I feel like Jeremy's vocals in the first 3 or 4 albums are a little bit more processed. And not that that's a bad thing all the time, but I like his more natural sound. Basically, like in The Act, Color Decay, and Flowers, I love that more natural sound of Jeremy's vocals than in some of their other works. So yeah, as much as I enjoy Plagues, it is a great album. I still like some of their albums. And I will say, between this and my number 9 pick, I could flip-flop them. Because at number 9 is The Act. I think The Act is a very solid album. I will say, the first time I heard The Act, because I've heard bits and pieces of the Devil Wears Prada here and there. Years ago, I heard Roots, and that was the only album I heard by them. And then I didn't really listen to them, and so like the first album I heard after that, and this was years later, was The Act. And the first time I heard The Act, I was not impressed. I was like, this is weird sounding. What is this? After I got into the Devil Wears Prada, and after the thing that came after The Act, I'll explain that later. I went back to it, and I really enjoyed The Act a lot more. Now, while it is down at number 9, my favorite song of all time from the Devil Wears Prada is on this album, and that's Wave of Youth. I think Wave of Youth has one of the most memorable guitar riffs, one of the best guitar riffs that Devil Wears Prada has ever done. I love the contrast between Jeremy and Mike on it. I love just how big it explodes in that chorus. And when the riff comes back, I don't know. There's something that draws me in like that from that song. So, yeah. And there's a lot of Numb is such a great song on The Act. I do enjoy it. It's their experimental album, in my opinion. So I can appreciate it for that. But I think their solidified sound is a lot more... I think they sound better in some of their other albums. Now, coming in at higher up on the list, this is where it gets hard for me. Because while I enjoyed those albums I just listed, the top 8 albums, they're all top 8 projects, the EPs are in there too, are so solid, it's hard for me to rank them. but I'm going to. So number 8 is Dead Throne. And when it comes to grouping the sounds together, I kind of think they've evolved in chunks. Each album or 2 albums have a similar sound, and they've kind of just changed it every now and then. I love that about the Devil Wears Prada. How they've changed their sound with every album or every 2 albums. What I mean by that is, I think Dear Love and Flowers have a very similar sound. I would group them together as this is a similar core sound. I think Roots and Zombie EP have a similar sound. Zombie's just a little heavier, with less of the melodic elements. I think Dead Throne and 818 are grouped together with a very similar sound. The Act is kind of on its own. Color Decay has parts of the Act, but a little bit more evolved. And Flowers is on its own sound. And I think Transit Blues and Space are similar, but I think Transit Blues gets a little bit more experimental. So, as I say that, number 8 is Dead Throne. And it's hard for me to do this because I love Dead Throne. And I love 818. I think 818 is higher on the list because I'll explain that when I get to it. Dead Throne is a very solid album, though. I really enjoy how heavy it got with raw vocals. It sounds a lot more raw. I think they did a little less processing on the vocals than that, but it makes it more heavy, and I love the riffs on Dead Throne. It's such a good album. 818 is coming in at number 7, and that is because I think 818 took the heaviness and darkness of Dead Throne and evolved it with a little bit more melody, and it just solidified it with a little bit more, I think, memorable riffs and memorable parts. So I think 818 is slightly better. I love 818. I think that's a very solid album. At number 7, has very memorable choruses. I liked what they did they had like a very Jeremy heavy song on there. And that's how you do the contrast, in my opinion. 818 is at number 7. Number 6, in my opinion, is Color Decay. Color Decay, and this is hard for me to rank it above Dead Throne and 818, and those 3 might be interchangeable for me because I love those 2 albums, but Color Decay I got into more because at the time I got into The Devil Wears Prada was right before Color Decay. And I think, so I was excited about a new album. I think that's why it's more memorable for me. Color Decay is just such a solid album. I think it has a good mixture of experimentation, kind of like The Act, with songs like Trapped and 25 and Fire doing their own kind of thing. They had very arena rock sounding songs like Salt and what's the other one? Sorry. Broken? Yeah. And then you have really, really solid songs like Watchtower is my favorite song off that. Love the riffs, love the chorus. Hallucinate is so good. It just has that heaviness, the chunkiness with that cool synth. Sacrifice, probably the most memorable chorus on the album, honestly. So fun to sing that one. Noise, I just love the riff in Noise and that bridge. The bridge is so sick, and the way they ended it with the same part. Love that. Time, it's just a solid album. Like, I was obsessed with this album in 2022, so I'm putting it at there. Now, that being said, there's only 2 albums left and 3 EPs. You might get mad at me for this one too, because most people, they'll either say their top album is Plagues or it's this one. I'm putting it at number 5. And you're going to be surprised. I mean, you could probably already tell what my number 4 is, or like the next album up is. And, most people won't agree with me on that. But number 5 for me is With Roots Above and Branches Below. I think this is not my favorite album by them. There is one album I value higher than this. But I think objectively, looking at it from a fan standpoint, this is their best album. I just have personal reasons for another album being higher than this. But this is the first album I heard from them back in, I don't remember, 2010. Probably 2010. Really, it is some of the best work Prada's ever done. with the riffs being super memorable. You know, I don't know what they did with Mike's vocals on this, but they sound really nice. I think it was a big step in evolution from their first 2 albums. Really love a lot of the synth parts in this, and just the heaviness and chunkiness of it. It's just such a solid album, and you know, I have so much nostalgia for this album too, because while I wasn't fully into the band at this time, this album holds a special place in my heart because it's the first thing I heard by them, and I had this on repeat for a while. Love this album. Super solid. Now, my number 4 pick, and a lot of people will not agree with me on this, but I think their best album, and you're like, wait a minute, their best album at number 4, there's a reason. I think it's Transit Blues. I think Transit Blues is my favorite album by them for multiple reasons. I think it has the best production they've ever done. And the reason, this is me, just my picky production brain, you know, everybody experiences music differently. I love what I hear coming out of the production of Transit Blues, with the guitar tone just being super thick. And, you know, I don't know how to describe it. I love the distortion they use in the guitar in Transit Blues. The bass drum, the kick drum is super punchy. So mixed with that overdrive or distortion that they're using with the guitar, it's just really like awesome production. I love the way this album sounds. And then I love how they went a little bit more experimental, but still kept those awesome riffs. And I think this album has some of the best riffs on it. You know, I love the riffs in shoot, I'm blanking on some of the names, but sorry. Let me look at this real quick. Sorry, Flyover States and Detroit Tapes, on the riffs on that. Love the experimental just like build-up. It just sounds like a build-up song, a lock and load. Worldwide has probably the best chorus on this album. Submersion is my favorite song on that, which is weird, but I love the riff in that one. Home for Grave Part 2 is really good. Transit Blues, such a good song. Great way to end the album. To the Key of Evergreen, probably one of the best songs they've ever done. Just the evolution of that song is amazing. And of course the first 2 songs just solid. So yeah, I really enjoyed this album. It is my favorite by them. And I love how some of the songs like Submersion, they're a little bit more experimental sounding as opposed to just heavy hitting metalcore. And I just appreciate when they do that. But yeah, I'm ranking it way above like experimental albums like The Act, because I think The Act was full on like, hey, it was a little less riffage and a little bit more experimental, and I still enjoy the riffs a lot in Devil Wears Prada. So, and I know Transit Blues had a different lead guitarist than all the previous albums, and that's, you know, he's been the guitarist since, but I really enjoyed a lot. Now you may be wondering, okay, you just named all the albums and there's still 3 spots left. My reason for that is I think Devil Wears Prada's EPs, the 3 EPs they've released, are better than all the albums. That some people might agree with me on that in some aspects, because, you know, from what I've seen, these EPs gain nothing but praise from everybody, and for good reason. Now, the order I put the EPs in everybody might not agree with, because number 3 for me is Zombie EP. Most people put this as their number 1. If this is not their number 1 EP from them, some people put this as their number 1 overall work from Devil Wears Prada. I'm putting it at number 3. I mean, obviously because I like the other 2 better. But yeah, I really think their EPs are so solid. Zombie EP took what I loved from Roots and made it heavier, and I love that. It was a perfect in-between point between Dead Throne and in the Roots album. And I think it just had some of the best riffs they've ever done, and that's why I love it. And some of the most memorable grooves, like you want to move and headbang to Zombie so bad. It's so good, and I love that about that. It's just so good. Like, there's nothing else I can no other way I can explain that besides it's good. You know, Zombie EP is phenomenal. Number 2, I'm putting Space EP as number 2, and I like it slightly better because I like it's a little bit closer to Transit Blues, and that's kind of why I like it better. Not just is it still have heavy riffs. I love the riffs on this album, or this EP too. Space had some really memorable riffs. But you get really memorable choruses too on this, you know, and namely with Alien and Supernova, which I think Supernova is the best chorus that they've ever done. That is such a memorable chorus. Love Supernova, and that's why Space is number 2, because I think I love the clean parts a little bit better, and some really cool keyboard parts on that, and just the riffs are really solid on that again. Now, my number 1 pick, you know, and this is, you know, not everybody's going to agree with this, but my number 1 pick for all of Devil Wears Prada discography is Zombie 2. The reason I enjoy this more than Zombie 1 is, and some of it is bias. My bias comes from, this is what got me into Devil Wears Prada. I said, yeah, I listened to Roots before, but I didn't listen to them for years afterwards. That was the only album I ever knew by them. And then I heard the act and wasn't impressed, so I was like, alright, you know, still not getting into the band. And then they came out with this. And Zombie 2, I heard Termination, and I was like, whoa. As much as I think Zombie had more memorable riffs and cooler riffs, I love the heaviness and chunkiness of Zombie 2 a little bit better. And I just think the production had a lot to do with that. The way they made it sound felt so heavy. And another thing, the reason I like these EPs is I love the theme. I love how they're themed, and you can really feel the desperation and hopelessness in Zombie 1 and Zombie 2. And I love that in Zombie 2. You can really feel it with just not just the heaviness of the music, but like some of the melody choices. Even Jeremy's cleans in Zombie 2 felt very eerie, and like Forlorn is my, if it wasn't for Wave of Youth, I think Forlorn would be my favorite song by them. I love the parts that Jeremy has in Forlorn. They feel so sad and desperate, and I love how they still have Mike's vocals over the cleans, so it feels very heavy still, and his vocals just sound so brutal in this. And I think that's another reason I like it better than Zombie 1, is because his vocals are more mature, and he's just got this heaviness in his voice. He sounds so brutal in Zombie 2, and I love that. And I love I love how he layers his vocals in this. And I will say, I forgot to mention this when I was talking about Dead Throne. Something I love about Mike's vocals as they have evolved, and he doesn't do it as much now, but in their first 2 albums, in the second album, you started to hear his lows a little bit more, and you could hear them in Roots too, which I really love. Love his lows, but Dead Throne and 818 are where his lows shine, I think. And they kind of drop off after that. But you hear it in Zombie EP 2. I love his lows, and he brought them back in Zombie 2. And I love that. You know, you still don't really hear it. You hear it in Hallucinate and Color Decay, and a little bit of layering in Color Decay. You really don't hear them in Flowers a lot, but I wish he would use his lows more. But yeah, that is my personal opinion, my personal ranking of Devil Wears Prada discography. You know, tell me what your ranking is in the comments below. What parts do you agree with? What parts do you disagree with? This is my personal opinion. I don't think this is definitive in any way, because it's my opinion. Again, I don't think there's a right and wrong to how you rank them, because at the end of the day, they're making music. I think everything they put out is great, and, you know, as long as they're doing what they love to do, that's good enough for me. This is just how I've enjoyed their music. So let me know how, you know, what's the first album you heard by them? What got you into Devil Wears Prada? What's your favorite song by them? I'm curious of all this stuff, because this is one of my favorite bands, and after hearing this most recent album, I kind of wanted to just put my thoughts out there. I've never done this for a video before, so if you want to see more of this on different artists, of kind of like an album ranking or my personal opinion on certain artists, let me know, because I kind of love doing this. This is fun. I know this is a long video. I've rambled. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say about this ranking and this my flowers review. So yeah, whatever you want. If you want to see more of this, let me know. If you want to see me do more full album reactions, I'm always down to. They're just very hard to record, so I don't do them as often. And then again, I'm always down to do other things too. So if you, or just song requests, just put them down in the comments below. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.